My name is Megan Bedell. I'm an editor at Corwin, and I'm very happy to be here with everyone and love seeing where everyone is joining us from. Dr. Sue Ann Highland is a dedicated educator and the lead national education strategist for school specialty. With over 30 years of experience in schools and districts across the country, she has served as a teacher, consultant, director of curriculum and instruction, a principal, a federal programs director, and CTE director. A specialist in school improvement and turnaround efforts, Dr. Highland is also an industrial organizational psychologist who's passionate about aligning people, processes, and learning environments for student success. Over the past 9 years, she has focused on integrating instructional best practices with innovative learning environments, helping districts design spaces that enhance teaching and learning. Her expertise bridges educational vision and physical space to create dynamic, future-ready classrooms. Her brand new Corwin book, Reimagining Learning Spaces, Designing Educational Environments for Our New Generations, was just published on October 6th. And I want to turn it over to Dr. Highland.
Thank you so much, ladies, for the introduction. I so appreciate it. Today, I hope that you get a little tidbit on how the environment can make an impact on teachers and really looking at, going beyond just stuff in the classroom. So, we're going to walk through several different things. We're going to talk about ways that you can have those quick little wins and how you can measure impact. And we'll get a chance to take a look at some great examples of what some really supportive environments might look like. So let's take a look at the reality that we all know so well. Unfortunately, we have seen lots of teacher turnover. That's costing our districts every single year. We know that stress and, burnout are two of the largest cited reasons for leaving the profession. And we're not seeing as many students going into our teaching programs. We also know that, that classroom is a little bit of that home away from home. That's that primary work environment. And we want to make sure that our teachers are well taken care of and really comfortable. And not only are they comfortable, but their students are. And these two things together really are going to help everyone stay engaged and well and excited about being there. So let's take a look. We know if teacher turnover is rising and it's up to 7% after pandemic, but don't forget that it means that there's other things going on too. We've got a 7% completely leaving our profession, but we've got lots of moves and transfers. And, we want to make sure we're taking care of that. And again, like I said, we want to make sure that we're also encouraging folks to come into teaching. We want lots and lots of brand new students. I know I'm super excited that my own daughter, my youngest, is going to become a teacher. And she was even a little nervous about that. She asks questions all the time about what stress is like and how do I get that job and where do I go? We want to make sure we're helping our new teachers to really prepare for all that we have to expect in the classroom. And then again, that burnout, it's not just a passing thing. It's not a here and there. We're really seeing that burnout's making a larger impact now on our teachers. So if our teachers stay in that classroom and they're in that building so much of their time, what is our opportunity? Well, our opportunity is really to explore new ways to retain teachers. Think a little differently and outside the box, not just simply a wellness program or not simply great recruiting practices. How do we get them to stay? We've seen lots and lots of changes across the nation that are good. Let's continue to explore those new ways. This is a new opportunity for us. We're going to look at those spaces and how can they really support wellness to reverse that trend. And then, of course, now we know that one of the biggest things that really impacts teacher retention is that wellness. We want to make sure that we're paying very close attention. And like I said, wellness programs are great, but think about how many things that adds to the plate. Can I just continue to add program after program? Well, let's give teachers a tool that might help them in different ways. So we're going to reimagine those learning spaces physically, culturally. They're going to hopefully ignite that energy and connection and maybe even help to reduce that breakout or that burnout. So when we think of those vacancies, how in the world am I going to get teachers to my building? As a former administrator, I know that recruitment was one of my biggest things that I did every single year. And with vacancies rising, we really want to make sure again that we think of that. So we're going to talk about that later. If we do these things with space, then maybe what does that leave our candidates thinking about? I know that sometimes physical space, we often hear things about lighting, about bringing the outdoors in. We've got all of these little things that talk about the actual built environment, but I would really encourage you to think about space in a different way. That natural light, the glass, the beautiful, lighting that you bring in is important and it does reduce fatigue and stress, but the actual things within that classroom, within that cafeteria, the hallway, believe it or not, those actually have a lot of really great research that say even the furniture that you put into a classroom makes a difference. So it can encourage that social connection. Even think of that hallway, a workroom, a lounge. I don't know about you, but I remember some of the first lounges that I had as a principal, and it was hand-me-down furniture from someone who was giving away tables, and we happened to have an old refrigerator that somebody was getting rid of. That doesn't exactly create that feeling of welcomeness and that encouragement that we care about those teachers. Then, of course, the other thing that it does, when you think about the furniture and the space within that building, it actually can help with autonomy and control. When the teacher feels like they can connect that classroom to their instruction, that can make an impact. I actually really want you to think about that furniture as a tool. It's no different really than the curriculum that you might receive, that you receive training and you've got all of these great tools to be able to deliver to meet those standards. That classroom environment can actually become one of your most powerful tool. Students, when they get that choice and voice about where they sit, how they learn, maybe they need to stand when they're learning about something or listening or working on a project, or they maybe want to sit underneath the table or relax on the floor. One of the most powerful, wonderful things that I think happened out of COVID is really that increase in student autonomy. I want you to think for just a minute when you were stuck in your home during COVID and you had to lock down and you were teaching, how did you teach? Did you always sit at a desk? Or let's take my daughter, for example. She was a freshman in high school and she had the most amazing, beautiful desk. It was adjustable, great ergonomic seat. However, what we found is she would sit on the floor on her bed. She'd lay on the couch. She would walk around the house, go outside. And even one time or two, I can tell you, she actually would sit in the hot tub and put her computer right up next to the hot tub and do class while she was sitting there. And what I really found and what it taught me is, man, she was doing what she needed to do to learn her very best. And I adore that piece that came out because now what we're seeing is tons and tons of student agency when the students are saying, I need to learn best sitting here, standing here. The other thing that really that wellness impact of the environment can do for our teachers is it shows them that guess what? We're investing in you. We want you to feel valued and respected as professionals, so we're going to put that money into you. So the three ways that we're going to approach that teacher space, I want you to think beyond just a lounge, beyond just the classroom. It's that holistic look at the entire building. So we're going to see some shared spaces. We're going to take a look at that classroom because we know teachers spend the most time there. And then we're also going to take a peek at some of those, what I call in between spaces, hallways, that outdoor area, those front offices. What other spaces can we utilize in that building to make teachers and students feel really welcome? So, those wonderful shared spaces. Let's just start with the lounge. A traditional lounge, again, might have that dated furniture, it might have that fluorescent lighting. Maybe there's not really a zone that's designated for here's a spot to eat and here's another one that you can sit and relax for a minute. It is just simply that hand me down from other spaces. Although now we can take a look and go, okay, well, what can we do? Well, we can revitalize that by making it really comfortable. Have a residential feel, but make sure that that is really comfortable um, furniture that's going to stand up to the time, to time. So we want to make sure that it's not residential style furniture because that definitely will break down a lot faster. We want good, natural, warm lighting, clean and organized. And then I'm going to show you a little bit that you can do as zones. And of course, this is going to be designed to support the staff. So it's based on their needs and wants. So, a few zones you might want to consider and talk to your staff about are, of course, that flexible space. Maybe you've got some mobile whiteboards, some modular tables. Maybe the room can be rearranged in different ways. A quiet zone, having some quiet spot that teachers can step out. Maybe they just need 5 minutes away. A wellness zone, having the plants, great calming colors, comfortable. And then, of course, the area that they can eat and get some nourishment. Maybe I saw one, I loved this idea. I have a gal that I went to high school with, believe it or not. She is a principal in a small district, and she actually put it out to the community and said, I'd like to provide some healthy snacks. So, can you maybe do some looking around your community, look at different resources. How can I provide some healthy snack options for our teachers? And good, clean water is always part of that. So what we want to make sure that we take away from those zones is that choice is going to meet their needs. And I always talk about meeting students where they are in that moment of need. Same thing goes for teachers. We know that sometimes we need that breather. So encouraging people to step away is going to be really important. So spaces like this, just even bringing one little corner might help, again, a teacher feel very calm, relaxed. If you look in the bottom right hand corner, you even see little nooks. These are spots where teachers can sit, has a little bit of an acoustic property to it, and they can be very quiet and calm. And what you'll see here is lots of different heights. Again, ways that teachers can feel comfortable. It doesn't have to feel like it's institutional. It can feel like it's more of a warm and welcoming spot. And then the classroom. So let's take a look at classrooms for a moment and think about ways that we can tweak and change those. And I'm going to give you a tool in here that comes right out of my book. But what I want you to think about is a good teacher work zone. Ensuring that those teachers have a good ergonomic chair, not student furniture. We want to make sure that it is fit for them. It supports them ergonomically, making sure that it's got some great armrests, some back support, good work surface area, but not too much. There's got to be a little bit of a balance when it comes to a teacher work zone. We know that whoever owns and has the largest footprint in a classroom is going to be the one that owns the learning in that classroom. So we want to make sure that teacher footprint is small, but adequate and organized. So making sure that they have great storage for their materials, a feeling that their personal items are tucked away and, safe and secure. And then again, professional, but not stale, not sterile. We do want to balance this with that wellness and comfort when it comes to the rest of the classroom too. Again, a teacher chair or stool that they can maybe float around, use for small groups. Again, something that's easy to move. You hopefully will have some good natural light in there. And then really looking to reduce clutter. So when you're thinking about what can I do in the classroom to help the teacher, how can I get some things where they're easily accessible for students, great storage, making sure that maybe even it's see-through and labeled so teachers can feel like they can pull things out right away. Or one better would be making that stuff, that those supplies that students need, really accessible for them in the moment. So how can they take a small cart next to their desks and have all their materials ready and very accessible for them? And then, of course, efficient in all of that same storage. Easy to clean surfaces, making sure that the students have that flexibility in their furniture, because we want to be varying the way that we're teaching. So in that, if we're going to do some small group, large group, teacher led, student led, maybe we've got some presentation of learning happening. That furniture needs to fit that. So being able to have the students own. And one question I get oftentimes from teachers when we plan environments is, oh my gosh, I have to move the furniture and reset it every time I want a new space. And I would encourage you to really use that as a way to get the kids involved. So let them move things around. Go back to what I call a home base. Create a small drawing on your board, or have the students draw it out, where everything needs to be at the beginning and end of the school day, or the beginning and end of a period, and that becomes your home base. During the work time, you'll be moving things around and they'll be moving things around to meet their needs. But then you say, all right, kiddos, let's go back to home base right before we go. They get to move it back. I know there is some fear sometimes in some people that if I'm having them move and I'm having them control that furniture, it's going to be chaotic. And I would tell you the things that we've seen and the stuff that the research really puts out there and encourages us is, guess what? It's actually going to help with behavior. It's going to help with engagement. It's going to really allow students to jump in and take that agency again for how and where they learn best. Again, looking at multi-height furniture, get those kids on the ground. Even high schoolers love to sit on the ground. We will often find that when we go in and try furniture, the high schoolers will oftentimes go for that beanbag or that floor pad, or a way for them to be able to sit on the floor. And then again, creating those zones for that learning. Do I have an area to be a maker space? Do I have an area that might be a spot for students to go and read or work in partners or small groups? In my book, I give you a few examples of different types of environments. And I want you to think of an environment in three different ways. Kind of a classic environment, or some people might call that traditional, innovative, and future ready. And some areas that we want to look at again are how I'm configuring those different desks and chairs to be in my classroom. Am I in straight rows, or do I have the ability to bring in multiple group sizes and configurations? And do I have some alternate seating? I also want you to think about the ratio that you have within that classroom. Is it 100% hard chair, flat desk spot in your room? Or do I have a little bit of that variability? And again, it doesn't need, nor should it be 100% informal, where it's all soft seating, all wobble stools, because that's actually not the way your body is designed. But it should be somewhere in the middle, a little bit of each. And then again, is the furniture stationary, or do I have the ability to have the students move it? And also looking again at those ancillary pieces, those extra little things. We know that there is such a wonderful movement for visible learning, and taking it out of even the math classroom to really show your work, your thinking, your process. Do you have the materials to support that? So, mobile whiteboards, larger lap boards instead of just a small piece of board on their desk. And then are you looking at those different learning zones that are within your classroom itself? So when you think of classrooms, you might be thinking, okay, well, what does this look like? I'm not definitely not saying get rid of every single desk in your classroom because we know those are needed. And some students prefer to be in a chair and a desk. Plus, we've got things like assessments and other times that students need to be sitting there. So, how does that look? Might have some soft seating areas. If you look at the very top right and the bottom right, those are mobile lap boards or lap stations. So you can be moving those around. Students can pull a piece of soft seating away, and they've got a little lap desk to be able to still have a sturdy spot they can write on. And then you've got things like this. So again, different sizes and shapes, different heights for students to be able to sit at something tall and maybe even pull that chair out and stand and reconfigure some of that soft seating. And if you look, I love on the top left, those two half circles. We will oftentimes see a horseshoe or, some kind of kidney table. Well, another way to think about that is, can I use furniture in that same way and make my room even more flexible? So those two sets of seats can come together as a large group, but they can also be pulled apart where the teacher can walk up in the center, or maybe another student is going to walk up in the center and work with that group. Again, really nice and flexible. And then this is that same exact set of furniture set up in a different way. That's one really big advantage to what we call a kit of parts. So, a kit of parts just means you've got a lot of different things in your classroom that can be used in a lot of different ways. This is another example of that. You could have tiered seating, but yet again, pull those apart, slide them, have the students be able to work in small groups, stand at the back of one of those soft pieces of seating, or in the very back where they've got that the tall tables. You can stand up and do your work. You can gather more students. You can even take that moment in time in teaching where you see something really great and exciting or something thought-provoking, and you say to the students, everybody stop what you're doing, come on over and gather, let's take a look. Those kinds of things are really great ways that you can have that management by walking around. You get a chance to do those teachable moments, and your furniture can actually help you do that. This is another example of that same type of seat that you saw a couple of slides ago used in a different way. So again, pull those together, pull them apart. You might not even look like this when you are having your home base set up, but students being able to move those things around, I would tell you, don't forget that you can even take those, push them all to the side, and use that large space. Well, then you've got your in between spaces. What do I do out in the hallways? What do I do, down in the back of the cafeteria or in a large gathering space that we have? Well, you could create things like collaboration zones, maybe a little nook out in the hallway where either teachers can gather. Maybe a teacher comes and needs to do some extra pull-out work, so they've got a spot for students. Maybe you even send your students out there to work together. Then you've got to maybe think about a quiet zone or a focus zone. Are there some small workspaces? Are there some private offices, but also maybe a space within the back, again, the back of a library, the back of a cafeteria, where you can have just that quiet moment? And then, of course, that wellness or that decompression zone. Oftentimes we hear about multi-sensory spaces or snoozling rooms that you might have within your building. Maybe that's got some good space for a sensory break, calming colors, lighting, soft places to sit. You may even need to put in some kind of movement zone to make it a wellness room. because you've got students or teachers that might want to sit on a bike and ride a bike for a few minutes. And then, of course, lovely spaces outdoors that you might be able to use. And then, of course, you've got that social zone. And that social zone is so important for teachers and students, and really important for teachers just to catch up with each other as human beings. This is such a human connected business. We really need time to catch up and say, hey, how are the kids? How's the family? So again, different spots where they can stop. I used to, as a principal, I used to have a coffee station that I would have in my office, and also a candy station, because my teachers really asked for some little, wonderful sweets. And then I did a coffee station for me to connect with families. And a few times a month, I would go out in the hall and I would create a coffee spot for them. And my teachers would always stop and socialize. So it was a really terrific spot to be able to, again, just socialize and relax with one another. And I did talk earlier about that biophilic design, or the importance of bringing the outdoor in. So I just wanted to make sure that I touched on a few of the ways that you could bring some of those design theories to light in your building. So lighting is really important. We know that migraine sufferers, have a really big problem sometimes with fluorescent lighting. It might, have some eye strain, fatigue, some other headaches that happen. So how can I change that lighting? How can I even maybe bring in not only the natural light, but some soft lighting maybe during a quiet time in a classroom? Color is really also very important. If you've ever paid attention, I would encourage you to watch even restaurants as you go in. What you'll often find in that nice, relaxed, maybe a little bit of a fancier restaurant, you might have warm, deep colors. That's going to encourage you to stay longer. You might see a lot of blues and greens. But then if you go to someplace like McDonald's, you'll see the use of red and yellow. You'll also hear, along with that color, some music that's coupled with that, that's a little bit of a faster pace. That's encouraging you to get in, get out, kind of move that traffic. When you think of that space for teachers, that wellness spot, those little wellness nooks or a wellness room, think of those colors that you might bring in. I know it's really easy to bring in that beige and that gray. Maybe how can I do a pop of color here and there? Not overwhelming, because we don't want it to be really busy, but very subtle things here and there. Maybe even bring it into your furniture. That soft seating or those quiet zones within the classroom, maybe it's color coded to help support that. And then, of course, my favorite is that biophilic element. How can I bring in plants? That material, that texture that really would help that feel so comfortable. Views to outdoor spaces are always important. If you happen to not have a great view for an outdoor space, how can I bring in the imagery and artwork to support that instead? The really important piece to understand about biophilia is that this shows a great connection to stress reduction. So bringing those colors and those materials in are very, very important. And then when you think of those hallways, those alternative spaces, all those spots that we talked about, really think about creating those micro wellness moments. So when you think of a hallway, how can I bring in those tiny little collaboration areas? Maybe a small work counter, maybe even a couple of impromptu spots with some bean bags where I can collaborate with someone. Then you've got to think of that visual piece. Again, bring in some of that biophilia, bring in some of those colors, so that way those are really places that draw you in. And then, of course, it's got to be functional. That is really, really important, because you all know, if you've been in schools for any period of time, that sometimes you have to walk all the way to the lounge or all the way to the office for something like a water station. So if your school is able to bring in those water stations that are very easily accessible for students and for teachers, really, really important. And then, of course, professional pride and helping the students to feel like it's their school and it is a comfortable place for for visitors, but also for us as the people who work there every day. Some of the other alternative spaces you might want to think about and extend that wellness into is the outdoor area. Is there some weather resistant furniture? Is it comfortable? Maybe teachers, I always like to encourage folks to get outside, walk on those breaks. Don't just feel like you have to stay in and you have to make copies or you have to stay in your classroom, but how can we go outside? Is there a patio or a courtyard or a greenery area that people can go and sit and relax? There is a lot of furniture out there now that is not something you have to refinish every single year. It's made out of some really great materials that are going to withstand all of that wonderful winter and the heat and all of those changes. I am here in northern Colorado and we get a lot of cold weather. We get a lot of wind. So we would need to make sure that our furniture that we would put out at a school could stand up to all of that. And of course, creating that walking pathway or a sensory garden. Do you have any of those kind of spots that teachers, again, can also access? Then, when you go back to that wellness room that we looked at, is that a quiet space that students can use? Is there a quiet space for teachers to use? Is there a spot, maybe you're short on space, but in the hallway, maybe even creating what's called a nook and having that with a door on it where teachers can go in and sit quietly and they're on their own. This is a really big trend, not only for schools, but also for places like airports and really large companies are looking at the impact of sensory overload and the need for that decompression. And if you look at a lot of really large big box stores are now having sensory friendly hours. You'll also see a lot of public libraries having sensory friendly evenings or sensory friendly story times. And what they will do is they'll calm the lights a little, turn off the additional music. They sometimes will even turn off things like additional TVs and monitors around the stores. So that way all of those noises are no longer there. And then, of course, making sure that your district prioritizes that mental health. And I have to share a really amazing example of one beautiful district that I spoke to just a few weeks ago, where their wellness director is also a former special ed teacher. And she said that they are so focused on mental health and the priorities of wellness for their staff that they have brought a clinic into each of the buildings. And it's a rotating clinic that takes care of some of those regular physical health things. So if you're feeling ill or if you need a flu shot, it's right there. But also, they have some mental health hours. And I asked her, what are the things that you're seeing? I loved hearing that she said they've got lower turnover. They've got higher ranking, that their teachers every year on the survey, it's getting better and better as a district that supports them. And they're seeing less absenteeism because instead of having to go out and do a doctor's appointment that's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I have to get out of school and take the day off and go drive over there. They can run down, get a flu shot on, a break or on a planning period, and they're not taking time out of school. So they feel really, really supported. The other thing to think about when it comes to a wellness room is you don't have to do new construction. You can repurpose a space. A lot of our districts are seeing smaller numbers in buildings and reorganizing the way that their boundary lines are. So look at, do I have an extra room or two? Do I have another spot that I can make one spot just for teachers for eating and dining and, conversing, and then a wellness room for them just to themselves? We just got done doing an amazing makeover for a school, and they wanted to do a wellness spot for the students, but it was so terrific to have the principal say, can we also just beef up and really take care of the teachers too? So I loved seeing that as another priority. And then, of course, we know professional development is really, really important. So, how are we treating our staff? Do we have a comfortable, well equipped room? Not just sitting in a big cafeteria or a gymnasium. Are there tables and chairs that encourage us to be collaborative and move around and talk and do the same things that we're asking our teachers to do with students? Is the furniture appropriately sized? Oftentimes we will be doing professional development and the only spot I have open is a first grade classroom. That becomes really uncomfortable. So we want to convey that respect. We want to have teachers understand that professional learning is just as important as learning for our students. So here are some just really terrific spaces, thinking outside that in that hallway. Are these spots that students can sit and work together? Are there spots that teachers can work together and have a little space for themselves? So what now? We've done the here's what, we've done the so what. Now what? What do we do next? I want to encourage you to think outside that classroom, think outside the box when it comes to wellness, because we do know that there's so much wonderful research out there that space can impact not only the achievement of students, the wellness of students, but it also is really important for personal well-being for the teachers. So, think about those ways that we can bring that to our teachers and show them that we care. So some of the quick things that you can do and some of the plans, if I were going to do a phased in approach and building that momentum for wellness over a longer period of time, it might look something like this. Doing a foundational year where I'm, kind of working on the paint, basic furniture, the organizing. Phase 2, I'm going to look at more of the creating of zones. Then in year 3 and beyond, wellness rooms, outdoor, those bigger amenities that take more time to raise that money. To do that, between grants, PTOs, you've got some bond dollars, some building dollars, whatever that might be. If you're looking at a faster track, this can be shrunk down to things like months or semesters. What I'm trying to encourage you, though, is don't feel like it all has to be done overnight. Doing some little quick wins oftentimes help. Rearrange furniture to create that zone. Maybe you just have to look around your building and find things. Adding plants or greenery or that artwork. Go beyond just those store-bought, inspirational quotes. How can we bring in things that have deep meaning for our staff? Talking to them, asking them. I love the idea of a gratitude wall. Expressing gratitude has a lot of really great research support for doing your own personal gratitude journal, having students do that journal, doing that reflection. But what about that public gratitude? Having staff appreciate one another. You can add things like comfortable throw pillows, small blankets. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot of dollars that you put into it, just ways that you can rethink that space in a quick way. And I want you to think about, too, that it doesn't just mean that we're doing this for our teachers today. It really is a great way to recruit new teachers. What candidates will notice when they walk in is they'll notice, do I have a space to be able to work? Do I feel like that it's a neglected space or a respected space? Do I have great lighting? Are things clean and organized? Do I have boxes stacked in the teacher's lounge? Sometimes that signal gives very important signals to those new candidates. And I love that last line. Does the building feel like it's life-giving or draining? Is it a place where I feel like, wow, okay, I feel comfortable here? I think that is so critical. And those underlying signals not only give new teachers that hint of what your building is like, but guess what? It also gives that same feeling to our communities. Our communities need to know that we are there and we love being there. The great thing is, if you make these little changes, even if you start small, you can talk to a candidate about that when they're coming through. And guess what? They will walk away feeling, wow, teachers are valued. They are investing in staff well being. I can envision myself here. And I always tell candidates when I interview them, guess what? You've got to fit us and fit into our beliefs and our systems. But I would encourage you to always think, do they fit my needs? Because we know not every building is right for everybody. And they might walk out there and say, wow, I love this. The leadership understands teacher needs. I'm going to be supported and not burned out. It's those little things that matter. When you start to do all of this, you're really creating that cultural shift within your building because spaces and community together really, really can sustain that teacher when maybe they get a little stressed or something happens. We're going to respect those quiet zones. You're going to establish those norms for what do those spaces mean. You're going to help encourage with that cultural shift, that connection. You're not alone. That is one of the most powerful messages we can send to our teachers. And it doesn't matter if you've been teaching 30 years or 3 minutes. Having that connection with other teachers, we are such a people business. And I tell everyone, we are the only profession in the world that trains every other profession. That's a really large burden and honor that we take on ourselves. It's also the only profession, or very few, I like to say the only, but very few professions, when you ask someone what they do for a living, they don't necessarily say, I teach third grade or I teach history. They say, I am a teacher. That means we're a heart-led and brain-focused profession. So I still tell everyone, even in my position today, I'm an educator first. That's where I care the most. That's what I do to support the most. You'll want to make sure when you're doing that cultural shift and you're looking at your spaces and building that community, gather input, honor that teacher voice and gather and ask them, what do you need? The one thing that I would encourage leaders to think about too is if your staff does go through large changes, their needs may change. So you may need to go back and revisit that. And then, of course, making sure that you communicate that value as leaders, as teacher leaders. You want to make sure that you're saying thank you for that input. Share that before and after out to your parents, to your community. And whether you're doing work through a company or you're doing work together as a community, it's going to show that same wonderful value. In one of the buildings that I was in, one of my favorite things we did is we actually had the students create a mural in our cafeteria. And it was so pleasant and wonderful. A teacher designed it, and then the students got to paint. And guess what? That became who we were. So it was so wonderful to see. And take a look, step back at in this process, look at both quantitative and qualitative indicators on does it matter? Does it make a difference? I will tell you with certainty that it does, but being able to communicate that to your community, to other teachers as they want to come into your district, you're going to really grow that community in so many ways that will absolutely surprise you. And then the last thought that I would leave you with is when teachers feel valued, even through their environment as this new and different way to think, They stay longer, they're healthier, they bring energy to their students. They're out there recruiting others to the profession. They're showing that, some of the nastiness you hear online or some of the stories you hear, it's a great profession, one of the most amazing places to be. They'll get out there and share with the community and spread the good news. They will model wellness for their students, something that often gets overlooked, but they will model for their students. Then your district also becomes an employer of choice. And then, of course, the ultimate thing that this brings is that students feel loved, supported, and are more engaged in class. So I want to just thank you so much for being here. I'm going to pass this right back over to the ladies and see if we've got any wonderful questions.
It was wonderful, Sue Ann. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
What you said there, reimagining learning spaces could lead to a cultural shift for kids and teachers and leaders alike. Anyone that wants to add some questions to the chat would be wonderful. I have a couple I can tee up for you in the meantime, but please, anybody else that's here, feel free to put it in the chat and make sure that you're sending the message to everyone so we can all see it. Um, First one, what are some considerations or guidelines for making sure that you're accommodating students with mobility concerns?
Oh, that's such a great, great question. One of the things that we talk about when we design spaces is universal design for learning. And we know that that has a great instructional impact, but you want to make sure that you have adjustable desks and the ability that that desk is wide enough maybe to accommodate a wheelchair or some mobility issues. You want to make sure that if you are providing those quiet, wonderful spaces for teachers or students, that they're able to access them, that you don't always have a step up or a step down. You want to make sure that that's level, that the seats are comfortable, wide enough, tall enough, or short enough. I always tell everybody varied seating is really important for all of those reasons. And then again, really watching too, remember that mobility is often unseen, and students who are stressed or students that have that sensory overload oftentimes get frozen in their tracks. So, do we have those sensory spaces that they're able to go and access? Very, very important.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, Here's one from Stan. If you're planning for a new building, should you plan the furniture first before you actually ask for a certain size room?
Oh my gosh, Stan, I love that question. I would tell you, you always first plan your learning spaces connected to the instructional practices that you want to see and the learning that you want to happen in that classroom. That should be the leading factor in whatever you do. So we always talk about leading with that instructional question. What does learning look like, sound like, and feel like in the classroom? And what kinds of learning spaces do we want to occur? When you lead with that question first, then, Stan, you are correct. The rest of the building comes. Making sure that you have a partner in that learning space, that furniture space, right there at the beginning of that building and that new construction project, because then everything I can retrofit anything, right? I mean, we've all done changes in our own homes. I move the furniture around every time my husband's gone on a trip, you know, but my furniture can only fit so many ways. And if I want to make sure that I'm doing exactly what my students need, then I've got to talk about the instruction first. Stan, I will tell you one thing I would encourage you to think about is make sure those in between spaces are on your list. Those wide, wonderful hallways are such a fabulous trend right now, and it's another way to extend that learning out into that space. Great question, Stan.
Yeah. Okay, got one more. So if my school has a limited budget for design changes or no budget, is
Mhm.
there a way I can do outreach to families or local businesses for support? How would I start that?
Oh my gosh, what another great question. I would say communicate your vision. Get together as a staff, talk about what places, again, on that wonderful series, start with the vision first. What do we want to do? What are the most important things? And then communicate that vision and share that out. Go to your local businesses, go to your families. You've got probably tons of families. I don't know about you, Megan. I don't like to paint. I am not a painter. So that's not something you would want to ask me, but oh my gosh, my best friend is a wonderful painter. So she would volunteer to maybe come in and do that for us. So just put that, you've got to be communicating what you want to see and they are going to get excited. I would give you one little hint though, that while you're doing a teacher space, do a space that impacts students too, because then your community sees that you're doing both. It's not just about one group or the other.
Well, thank you so much, Sue Ann. This has been a really helpful hour.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.